With completion of the trailing edge material, we're at 120 hours into this build. You can get that butterfly or moth. So we're going to do the trailing edge now, and the trailing edge is going to end up being about 1.5 inches wide, but I'm going to try to cut both parts of it out of this. So I'm going to cut this wider than that, 2 inches wide, maybe slightly over 2 inches, and that just to make this piece easier to work with when I cut my 15-degree angles. And then of course we want to measure, once we get a good look at the grain, you want to measure how much distance you have until it takes this radical slope. And 8 feet, the one piece we need is 8 feet, and it comes to right about here, and that's going to be good enough. If this was Sitka spruce or poplar or white pine, wouldn't even want that little bit of slope, but commercial white ash, very strong, even in significant cross grain. Okay, I don't have a tripod. I left it out at the hangar, so did get to go do some flying. That's why this here's been taking a while. But anyways, right here we want to put a 15-degree mark. It's hard to see, we're looking into the sun, but you want a little bit of a flat on the trailing edge. Not quite 1/8 of an inch, maybe 60 thousandths if you can hit it, but you want a little bit of a flat on that trailing edge, and then draw a line down there at 15 degrees. Well, it's 16 degrees actually. I measured the very trailing part of my ribs, and it's actually closer to 16 degrees. Well, it's just too bright out here, you can't really see it, but I've got the saw blade meshed up with that side of the pencil mark, and if it does cut right up to the corner, say, and doesn't leave us a flat, well, we cut this 2 inches, so we got plenty of room that we can go ahead and run it through and put a slight flat on the back side of it. All right, so we got the 2 of the trailing edges with fairly narrow trailing edge. Looks like one might be a little over 60 thousandths. The other one looks right about on 60 thousandths. And I had to change the insert to this wooden insert because now we've got to get this little gap right here. That's going to be the trailing edge sitting down in there. So, and we want to get it to 60 thousandths wide, or close to it anyway. So we've got to push this fence right in close to that saw, but yet have something for it to. Well, I guess it doesn't really need anything in the insert because the table, we got plenty on the table. It's a long enough board. It's not going to sink down in there, so we should be good. And we might as well just remove the feathering board because it's not going to do us any good against a board that's already cut, sitting at an angle coming up like this. So we're going to have to hold in on it and hold down on it and make sure at least until this far side touches here that, you know, we keep it pretty straight. And sorry, I don't have my tripod, so can't show you what I'm doing here, how unsafe I'm being. Now we got some nice, thank you to my wife for being the camera woman. So got nice thin edges and even got some veneer to make plywood with if we need some. And so we'll save all this. Now we are ready to cut the length to bring this here width, thickness here, bring it to the 530 to 560 thousandths I've measured on most of the ribs. So we'll just go 500 and probably go 530 or 40 thousandths, and then if the ribs stick up above this, then we'll just blend the top of the rib down. Yeah, that's what we'll do. We are going to have to measure each one of these individually because it depends on how thick that their trailing edge is. It's just too bright out here. It just depends on how thick that is and where this angle starts at as to how much we need to take off the back to get them the same height, and therefore they'll relatively match up on their angle too. But we need two 8-footers. By the way, I didn't mention that. We need two 8-footers and then two 5-footers. The 5-footers are for the main part of the wing, and the 8-footers are going to be for the ailerons. So next thing, we'll take and chop off all this extreme grain right here. Take it right to there, and then from there we'll measure 5 foot. This will be the short one because it's got some extreme grain over at the far end too. The other ones were fairly straight, at least on the one end, and I could get 8 feet out of them. We've got good grain right up to 5 feet, 60 inches. And incidentally, when I first cut the bad grain off that end, my mark was on this side of the blade. Don't accidentally slide it over, mark 5 feet, and cut it on this side of the blade again. These are kind of wide blades, and you will be that short on it. It's got to be slid over to the other side of the blade. So now we come inside, and of course we start by reading all of the assembly instructions all the way through. Read your instructions all the way through before you start anything. And then we're going to step over here and take a look at how the ribs line up with the trailing edge. So we're going to start with the 8-footer. This is the aileron. This is the outboard part of the wing. And we're going to start with the 8-footer, and the notch goes on the left-hand side for the left-hand wing, the outboard side. And the inboard side won't get a notch. So we'll go 1 foot at a time until the next to the last one, because, well, we won't have any material here anyways. Because this one goes with the wing rib, goes with the 5-footer. Now the 5-footer will get a notch on both ends, which means the last notch might be slightly short, and we'll cut it manually. Just by a little bit, like 1/8 of an inch or maybe 1/4. We're going to call this the right wing trailing edge, and so this is going to be the outboard side. We're looking from the front, see. So this here is going to be our starting notch, and we're going to use our T-slot to cut the to cross cut this, and we're just going to do this one, you know, without any kind of stops or anything. Then we slide this one over into a 1/8 inch stop. Now on the first one, we will just have to eyeball it with the edge like that, and then we'll slide this against it, the thing we've already cut out. We'll slide this against it, and this here will be set 12 inches from this side of the blade. So this side of the stop and this side of the blade will be 12 inches apart. And to do that, we're going to clamp it right here, sticking up beyond that, and then we'll just slide this so it's 12 inches away from the far side of the blade. And there we have it, hooked over one of the teeth going to the far side, and right at 12 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the first strip out right there, and then we're going to move it over to that one mark, the 1/4 inch mark that I made on this. Oh, geez. We've got to set the height for a 1/4 inch. So that fits in that first notch. It's too tight for this, that's good. We'll sand it until it's just a snug fit and slides in snugly. And we measure the It's exactly 12 inches. So everything looks good there. So we can go ahead and continue sliding a notch. Well, and this time we can, now we have a full notch, we can pull it this way against it. Not real hard because it's clamped that way, but you pull against it this way with the T-slot up here. Turn the... And then push the other end against it. And a wobbly, but it works pretty good. And then you clean out the middle. It gets less and less wobbly as you get it more even, the weight of it more evenly spread. Now we have the left wing, and this is the outboard for the left wing, so we're going to measure in and make a 1/4 inch mark. But to use this gauge we set up, we're going to have to turn it around, and we'll start our cut like this. But now we have the angled side here, so what we're going to do is turn this around, T-slot around, and that come through there. Yeah. So now we've got the square edge against the T-slot, and we'll be able to use our gauge for the 1 foot mark. Now as you work your way across, if you don't have each slot pushed firmly to this side and cut, and then firmly to that side and cut, if you're just off just a little bit, gradually as you work your way across, the slots are going to get smaller and smaller, because the slot you're cutting is going to be smaller. Now what you're cutting it, setting it over this, moving it side to side, is smaller, so they'll progressively get smaller. So each cut has to be firmly placed against that, not real hard. You don't want to distort it or make them get bigger, but bring it against it. And then if you get to the end and you find, like I just did, that it's like 3/16 instead of 1/4 inch, go back until you find the one. I started with 260 thousandths, just over 1/4 inch. That's where I wanted to stay. So I went all the way back to my, next to the first slot, right there. The first knot is more of a notch, not a slot. So the first slot, I went clear back to my first slot and started over. And now they're all 260 thousandths wide, and you come out even, within, I'd say within, a 64th or a 32nd of what I prognosticated. And all of your notches on the 8-footers should match up just about perfect all the way down the line. And none at the end. The 5-footers are easier because you start with a notch just like before and work your way to the end. But once you get to the end, the far end, you go ahead and, regardless of the length, it'll probably be 11 inches and 3/4. You go ahead and put a notch at the far end. So now we have the 8-foot and the 5-foot trailing edges all complete. And I'm going to head out to the hangar because there's an FP101 that needs some things done to it for a friend of mine, and he's actually going to give me a 440A with a redrive on it to do. It's quite a bit of work I got to do on it, but I'll put a separate video on for that.